keep it contaminant free. What is a contaminant? Well, obviously we're going to talk about that. Brought to you by the Indiana Healthy Homes Alliance and Improving Kids Environment. My name's Joan Ketterman. I'm the training manager at the Environmental Management Institute. So we ask this to you every time. What is a healthy home? Hopefully somebody designed it well enough to give the occupant health. And anytime it's been renovated, or anytime you do maintenance issues, you want to support what makes that home healthy and make those suggestions to the folks that live there. Our objectives and what we say to you, and then what you're going to be looking for when you walk in to somebody's residence, is what contaminants are there? Where do we find them? What are the health problems if they're there and there's exposure over a long period of time? And are there solutions? Sometimes they're not inexpensive solutions, but are there solutions? Our health is also worth some of the money that we have to think about if we're going to be spending. So what do we see in a home that's obvious? Paint. Lead is often in paint in places built before 1978. Not so obvious is radon, and Indiana is full of radon. And much of Indiana, especially in central Indiana, is in the highest rated zone for finding radon. Mercury is something that was in old thermostats, old thermometers, and asbestos, again, in our older homes, in particular those homes built before 1970, which doesn't mean it's not in the older homes, but more often found the older the home is. And then there's the things that you might be bringing into the home. So cigarettes, cigars, or e-cigarettes. Yes, you're contaminating the air. There are many, many chemicals. There's well over 100 chemicals in cigarettes. How about pesticides? So is getting rid of that pest, spraying that ant that you see, more important than the health of the people in there? And if you watch our video on Pest Free, we talk about ways to do that without chemicals. Air fresheners and artificial fragrances. Pretty much anything that smells good is a chemical. It's artificial. It's probably not really healthy for you to breathe that in on a regular basis. Everybody's favorite thing, the Glade air fresheners, the plug-ins. Well, guess what? Get rid of them. Find the source of the odor and clean it up. If you really need to spray, a very simple way to do that is a baking soda and water mixture. You can spray that in the air and you've made your own chemical, if you will, your own air freshener. You can put a drop of essential oil in it. It smells better if fragrance is important to you. And it costs you almost nothing. But if you can find the source of the odor, if that's why we're trying to cover it up, that obviously is the best thing to do. What are you using for cleaning products? Inexpensive, easy to use, baking soda, vinegar. There are things that are out there that don't cost very much and do just as well, just as good of a job. It gets it just as clean. Add some essential oils, some lemon to it, instead of buying chemicals that are bad for your health. Flame retardants. It's not an obvious thing, but it turns out that when you buy furniture and carpeting and mattresses, that flame retardants may be in there. There's vinyl in almost everything. That's got some contaminants in it, as well as BPA, which has certainly made the news over the last several years, especially in products for children. So the sources of contaminants in the home: lead can be found in paint, and just because we have lead in our paint doesn't make it a problem. When the paint is not managed in place, it's not maintained, and it starts peeling, if the window, when it goes up and down, begins to create dust, and that dust gets on the floor, then it's a problem, especially for youngest children who are on the floor and they're crawling in the dust. And then they sit down very pleased with themselves and they put their hand in their mouth. And they're so excited to find it there. And then what are they eating? What are they putting in their mouth? Whatever's on the floor. It can be in the soil, the same thing, peeling paint on the outside of the house. And over time, over years and years and years and years, that those paint chips and that peeling paint has gotten into the soil and created some dust. And then you're out in the garden and that comes in with you on your shoes. Taking your shoes off as you walk into a house is a really simple way to reduce the contaminants from outside the home, bringing them in. We certainly all have heard enough about lead in water. And your water company tests that. But they test the water that they delivered to you. It may be in the fixtures in your home. And so that's just something to know, that just because the water company says that it's good doesn't always mean that it is. So a simple thing is to flush the water out, let it run for 20 or 30 seconds before you drink it, and that can help reduce the amount of lead that's in the water. Do you know that sometimes jewelry, the inexpensive jewelry we get out of bubblegum machines and we get that are geared toward kids, often will have lead in it? Even though it's been banned or reduced to a very small amount in the things that we can purchase at the store, doesn't mean that when it comes from overseas that they're always paying attention to that ban. So think about what your children are putting in their mouth and be aware of the fact that it can be in things like jewelry, and it can be in other products that are bought. It can be in pottery, especially pottery that comes from overseas, and the glazes and the pretty colors that are on there. There can be paint from there. There was an example of a child poisoned by lead in Marion County, I believe, and they looked at the dish, and it was a gift from, grandma or someone overseas sent over. It said on the bottom, not to be used for food. Only it was in English, and they couldn't read the English. And over time, some of that glaze wore off, and the child ate on it every day, and it occurred to give her lead poisoning. So something as simple as looking at the dishes. Radon. What is radon anyway? It's odorless, it's colorless, you can't smell it, you can't see it when you walk into a home, but it comes from the soil. It can even come in through groundwater. So any little cracks and holes in the foundation can be a place that air can get in and bring the radon along with it. Is there any way for you to know it's there? Not unless you test it. How about mercury? Does somebody have an old thermometer? That can be an easy question, and if they do, or an old thermostat, what do they do with it? It goes to your household hazardous waste, and most counties have one of those. So you can drop them off at different times. There's Toxaway days that they can bring those things to. So ask the question and then encourage removing those from the home. How about asbestos? Well, that might require a person who's been through some classes and gotten a license for both testing and removal. But the obvious places where you can look and make the suggestion that at least it's maintained in good condition, flooring, especially 9x9 tiles, almost always have it. Other tiles might have it, but it depends upon the age. Attic insulation often contains asbestos dust in it. You can see it in the wrap on the pipes as you look at the picture. There's a white seam tape that you find on ducts and pipes in a basement oftentimes, and that can be an asbestos material. If it's left intact, nobody's tearing it, nobody's scraping at it, then it's not an issue. But if it's damaged, then there should be some thought as to what to do about that. And if you want to read more, EPA's got a website, epa.gov/asbestos, to give consumers some basics, as well as Indiana's Department of Environmental Management has guidance for homeowners as well. What are things that you might bring into a home? What are things that you can look for when you're visiting one of your clients? Yeah, I know, nobody wants to talk about smoking in the home. Nobody wants to give up their smoking, but it is a problem. It does cause health issues besides lung cancer. Pesticides. Pesticides are designed really to do one thing: kill pests. So do you really want something around that can kill pests that then can be breathed in and ingested by the members of the household? We talked about air fresheners and all the chemicals in those. How about your cleaners? Yeah, bleach is good for a lot of things. We love that smell of bleach. It makes it clean, but it's not good for your health, especially in large quantities. So the product itself, something that you buy off the shelf, is the problem. And if you can talk to your clients about learning to read labels, if you can help them read the labels, you can often find that there's other choices to be made when you do that. How about flame retardants? In theory, flame retardants are a good thing. It reduces fire so that people can safely get out of a house. But what we've learned since then is that they're also a health hazard. So where might you find them? In your furniture? Can you tell by looking at it? No. In your mattresses? You can ask the question when you buy a new one to make sure it doesn't have the flame retardants. It might have inorganic wool because it has to have something to reduce fire. And even in some baby products, again, mattresses, something to ask the question. Plastic casings of some electronics. And that dust can be hazardous, especially to the youngest who happen to live in the house. Are we saying get rid of your couch? No. So what can you do? The more you vacuum, especially with a HEPA filtered vacuum, then the less dust you have around. So when we talk about cleaning, there are lots of reasons, but one of them is to get the dust that might come from that furniture and do the best that you can to keep it clean, to reduce the amount of flame retardants that are being ingested. Remember when we talk about children, and the smaller the child, the more it becomes an issue. Children breathe in more air for their size than adults do, bring in more food and calories than adults do if we look at, the size and the weight of a child. So every little bit of contaminant that's in the dust that they put in their mouth can cause a lot more of a problem than it can for an adult. Other sources, vinyl. Vinyl's everywhere. So it's in the raincoat, it's in toys, it's at the bottom of our shoes, it's what we put on our windows. It can be seat covers, shower curtains. Now, we're not saying don't buy any of those things, but we're saying is you need to be conscious about how much you might have in your house. Are there other ways to do it? Or reduce the amount that you have in other places, and keep anything in good condition. BPA, nowadays mostly it'll tell you not that it does not have BPA. And containers. Can you heat up your food or keep your food in glass versus plastic, especially if you're going to heat it up? Canned foods. Many of the manufacturers have been working towards reducing or eliminating it in their canned food, but that doesn't mean that all of them do. Water bottles that you and I use, baby bottles, can we use glass? Yeah, except that the Child Care Center won't let you take that in. And so they've taken the BPA out and probably put something in that might be equally as harmful. It just hasn't been tested yet. So anything we can do to reduce our reliance on plastic is a good thing. What are some of the health effects? So we've talked about lots of different contaminants, and turns out there are lots of different health effects. And so you can't go into the doctor's office or go into an emergency room and say, I know what caused this because I have this in my house. So cigarettes for adults can be cancer, heart disease. But if you have children in the house when you're smoking, or in that car when you're smoking, they end up with ear problems, lung problems, bronchitis, and they're sick from the residue of that secondhand smoke. So it doesn't affect just the smoker. Lead is a neurotoxin. So it means it can reduce IQ points, it can and go to aggressive behavior. So we want to keep our children away from any lead dust, from eating lead paint, from ingesting it in the water. Asbestos can cause a variety of cancers. Mesothelioma is one of those. I'm sure you've heard the commercials for that. But it's long-term exposure that can do that. And if it's not in good condition, or somebody is sanding or scraping and drilling and grinding, we want to keep the dust out of the air. We want to keep the fibers out of the air. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in this country, and it happens a lot in Indiana. A simple test, your health department will often help you out, costs next to nothing. And as fixes go, it can be fairly inexpensive compared to some of the other ones. A mitigation system will go into a property. And if it's a rental property, then that would be something the landlord would need to manage. Mercury, also a neurotoxin. It can cause damage to the digestive system if someone were to ingest it. It's harmful to the immune system. And it's not something that you can see. It's often hidden, so you have to look for that in a home. Pesticides, cancer, or just breathing it in when you're spraying it can be an irritant to the lungs. Cleaners, harmful to your lungs, and if you read the labels on there, you can find out some of them will even cause burns. Flame retardants, we talked about those in mattresses and couches and other places. And an endocrine disruptor means that it affects the hormone levels and the balance in someone's body. It can also be a neurotoxin. It can also cause cancer. Air fresheners can cause the immediate effect of nausea and headaches, but over time it can also be an irritant to your respiratory tract or your lungs. Plastics, back to that endocrine disruptor again, and causing cancer. So minimizing our exposure is the key. It's about the dosage. So one-time exposure to many of these things doesn't cause a problem. But over a long period of time, living in a house with radon can cause lung cancer and you don't know it. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, but it's there for 20, 30 years, then people get diagnosed with lung cancer. It takes a long time. There is no really safe level. We've talked about that for lead in particular. There's no safe level. And one exposure doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a problem, but over a long period of time, it can make small issues in the body. Asbestos, it doesn't show up if you have asbestos poisoning. If you've had too much asbestos exposure, you won't know that for 20 years down the road. It takes a long time. So some people choose to ignore it because, oh, nothing's going to happen and I won't even be around then, or I won't be in this house then. But it's still something that can add to the burden in your body and your system, along with all the other things, and that can begin to add up. It's very hard to look at one contaminant and say one thing has happened and nothing else can go with that, because it is an accumulation of all those other things as well, and it doesn't show up right away. If something makes you sick, then you know it right away, but for so many of these other things, it's the long-term effects when we talk about these contaminants. And so minimizing the exposure as soon as we can, and reducing it to lower levels if we can, those are all things that can be helpful to occupant health. So when we talk about solutions, when we talk about lead, we have another video that's going to review that in more detail. Paint was allowed to have lead if you bought it over the counter, residential paint, if the home was built before '78. There's ways to test for lead. There's quick ways that a homeowner can do that, or you can call a health department, and some health departments are geared up to assist in testing for lead. any dust that you have, wet cleaning is the best way to make sure that you have it cleaned up thoroughly. And elbow grease is the other thing that makes a big difference when I'm cleaning up lead. I have to work hard at making sure I have all the dust. If I have cracked or peeling paint, make sure that it doesn't create dust. Can I make sure that it's not falling on the floor? Trying not to disturb it until we can get it fixed. Something a homeowner can do following lead-safe work practices, but it's often better to get somebody who's in the business and is properly certified to do that. If you suspect that there's lead in the soil because you find paint chips or because of the location and it's near a lot of manufacturing, or once upon a time there was a lot of manufacturing in the area, a simple thing to do is just cover the soil. Vegetation, some ground cover, some mulch, so that the dust doesn't get on your shoes, doesn't get on your clothes, doesn't get on the pet, who then brings it into the home. Preferably not eating food that you grow in that soil. So if you can get some clean soil and do a raised bed, that's a better way to grow that food. 400 parts per million, if you were to test it, that's the level at which HUD suggests that you take that out and replace it, or you cover it. How about water? Lead pipes, you can look at them. If they're dull gray and they scratch easily, that could be an indication that it's there. You can have your water tested. It would have to sit for 6 to 8 hours before the test. So, and you're going to take the test where the water is most often consumed, and that will tell you if it's in the fixtures in your kitchen, in your bathroom. So again, the water that's tested by the water company doesn't necessarily tell you what's in your property if it's in your fixtures. If you can run to get some cold water, 30 seconds or so, that will at least flush out what's in your tap. That doesn't necessarily take care of what's in the service line to bring it in from the street. Hot water will bring out the lead more likely than cold. So don't drink or cook or make formula with hot tap water. Better to use cold water if you can. Other places lead has been used over time. The old mini blinds, and supposedly they don't do that anymore, but we don't know, and those go up and down, and you turn them frequently, and eventually the sun shines on them and they can make some dust for you. So cleaning those on a regular basis if you can. Painted toys, not supposed to have it anymore, but what about those hand-me-downs that belong to your Uncle Quinn and he's sharing them with you? Well, how do we know that there's not lead in that paint? Candy from Mexico and some other places. Folk medicines, our grandmas always use this to treat a digestive ailment. Well, what do we know that's in there that comes from overseas? So you have to be careful with things like that, and it's a question you can ask. And what about your work? So one of the questions you can ask folks when you're in doing an interview is, where do they work? Because they can be bringing lead home with them on their clothes, on their shoes. Are they working in construction? Our plumbers run into it in the fixtures. If someone works with old furniture, when we talk about paint, lead and paint, it's not just paint, it's in other coatings. So it can be in the hardwood, beautiful hardwood furniture or floors, and we go to strip those, and the stains and the varnishes had lead in them, and we're sanding them, and we're creating a lot of lead dust. Batteries still have lead in them today. So recycling runs into a lot of lead, especially in our electronics, which is why they're not supposed to go to our landfill anymore. They're supposed to be recycled. So looking for the Toxaway days and places that will take those electronics. So if nothing else, removing the shoes, washing the clothes. If you came from a construction site or did some work with lead, wash those clothes separately if you can. So those are suggestions you can make to reduce lead exposure. Radon, get the home tested. Health departments will help you with that. Or you can go to the store and somebody can buy one, fairly inexpensive. And then again, the health department, our EPA's website, the state health department, if the local doesn't have means to help you out, they can give you some suggestions on a mitigation system. Old thermostats, if they get replaced, they can be more energy efficient home, and we can get rid of the mercury that way. Asbestos, keep it in good shape, just like the lead. You can get advice from a professional. You can call your health department. They may be able to help you out. The Indiana Department of Environmental Management has some asbestos folks that can also give you some suggestions. Cigarettes. I know it's pretty hard to talk to people about smoking in their homes, but if they're open to a suggestion, at a minimum, if they can smoke outdoors and not indoors, you can reduce the amount of contaminants inside the house. Even better, they have a smoking jacket. They have something they wear, maybe even a hat. So much of that cigarette smoke and all those contaminants, all those chemicals that are in those cigarettes, then they get absorbed by the cloth, and that's less that you might have on your person and your clothes that you wear inside the house. So even in the summer, if you put some kind of a jacket on, that can reduce the amount in the house. So at least if you can talk people into doing the outside smoking, that makes a big difference to the health, not only their health, but the health of the other individuals that live in that home. Pesticides. We're going to do a whole video on integrated pest management. But if pests are an issue, and so people are getting out the ant and wasp and killers and the different things, can we go to instead keeping things clean, eliminating the food and water sources, keeping them out? So we'll talk about those on other videos, but those are easy things to do to reduce one pretty harsh chemical in your home. Air fresheners, keep things clean. We don't have odors. Open windows. And depending on the time of the year, if people can open their windows at any point in time during a day or at nighttime, then that reduces the need for an air freshener. So making your own is the best way, and keeping things clean to reduce the need for having those air fresheners. If we can buy something that has no odor, so you're talking about your dishwashing soap and your laundry detergent and what else, and it's got all sorts of fragrances. Those are all chemicals that you're introducing, and if it's on your clothes, then it's getting into your skin. So if people can buy with no fragrances, that's a better way to do it. If people can do their laundry without fabric softener, that's just chemicals added to the clothes and your skin is touching those. Dryer balls, you can go to a store and buy plastic dryer balls for a minimal amount, and it's a lot cheaper over time than your fabric softener sheets. So those are little things that somebody can do for very little money to reduce exposure to chemicals. We have lots of green cleaning recipes at the IndianaHealthyHomesAlliance.org website. Vinegar, baking soda, very inexpensive items. You get your house just as clean, and you've reduced significantly the number of chemicals. Looking for BPA free, you see that logo there, or something that tells you there's no PVC, especially buying a mattress, because you spend so much time on that mattress and your skin close, and babies even more time. Look for something that says flame retardant free mattress. And so you can ask that question when you're out doing your shopping. Thanks for listening today. We have many more resources available on here. And if you have any questions, you can always call the Improving Kids Environment phone number or send us a note, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.